Austin, Texas. Welcome.
Announcements. I don't have any family of Rotary. Anybody have anything they want to share about what's going on with our Rotary community? Okay. With none, I will move to an announcement about the board. So each year we go into recruiting mode for new board members. And so I encourage those of you that have interest to serve, come see me, Rodney. We are looking to add candidates for the board. We've got several, but or if there's somebody that you know would make a great Rotarian, you can nominate them without them knowing it, and then I'll go put the pressure on them. So I try to be low pressure, but we are looking to get board candidates. Some of you remember the old days of the comical induction nomination speeches. It's not quite that. It's not as much pressure, but we'll present a slate of board to the membership. The plan is sometime in March. So please consider, it's not a hard ask. It's a great, worthy enterprise to give back to your community. You meet with like-minded people once a month before Rotary. So it's not a huge ask, but come see one of us if you're interested. I will mention another little service opportunity for February. Our club with other local clubs is doing a project for Big Brothers Big Sisters. It's a front step repair job. They describe it as a couple of hours. We probably don't need an army, but for those of you that are looking for a chance to do a service project in February 8th at 8 a.m. in front of the Big Brothers Big Sisters. So we'll mention that again before our next meeting. And my last thing I want to do is recognize, we have gone to once a quarter recognizing people that have reached perfect attendance in that previous quarter. And so this quarter we have 2. And again, in the environment we're in, I think any perfect, I mean, a year is awesome, right? Michael Newpower, 3 years perfect attendance. Yes. And John Rosenberger, 12 years perfect attendance. So you can see Michael gets to give himself an updated little badge. But anyhow, appreciate you guys and your attendance in this club. And again, to each of you, it's encouraging to see a full room. We might have to add another table, Michael. We'll see how it goes. But with that said, I'll call up Rodney to introduce today's speaker.
Well, we are very pleased today to have Stephen King from Rockingham County with us, and many of you know Stephen already. I'm going to do the brief bio just in case, because I was telling Stephen before, I enjoy getting these bios because I learn new things about folks. So I won't share all of these things, but Stephen was born actually in Roanoke, so he was born down my way. But was there for a very short time before he and his family went to Indonesia on a mission project. When they came back, they settled in Buena Vista, and that is kind of where Stephen calls home. Spent his growing up years in Buena Vista, graduated from VMI in '88 with a bachelor's in of science in civil engineering. Spent a few years in Fredericksburg and Alexandria before he ended up back in Buena Vista as the county or the city engineer for Buena Vista. Did that for a number of years until he ended up here. And he was here as the Director of Public Works, was named as the County Administrator in 2016. And he lives here with his wife, Mary Hess, also from Buena Vista, and their 3 children, some of which maybe are here and not here. I know two Hokies and a Duke, I believe. So welcome, Stephen.
were smart enough not to go to VMI. So my wife, when VMI went co-ed, Virginia Military Institute for our Austin folks is in Lexington, Virginia. It used to be male only. It went co-ed. My wife said, I don't know why any male or female would want to go to VMI. Some of the best brisket I ever had was in Austin, Texas. Cut it with a fork. Welcome to Virginia. So one of the things I like to tell people, this is just really interesting to me, and I want to compare 2019 to 2023. We had a Second Amendment sanctuary discussion that had to be moved to Spotswood High School because the number of people who attended, 3,000 people attended. It would have been 5,000 if people could have gotten there. And it was really a thing that I'll remember in my 20 plus years, almost 30 years now in local government, just the volume of people there. And then in March of 2020, we had to close our building to the public because of COVID. When I compare those two things and how close they were, the timing of it was just bizarre. And we reopened the building to the public in June. I was sitting at the front door in a chair welcoming people coming in. We took shifts, people there, taking all the precautions that we were advised, but people to come into the building. Because we're a public service group. Board of Supervisors, their meetings were always in person. They did not skip a beat, they met. We added to the dais to be able to spread them out, but we could only have 10 people in those meetings for a while, which was also strange. So I'm going to talk just briefly about, I'm going to go through these quickly because I know your time restrictions. A lot of folks talk about development, too much growth, we're going too fast, too much. 1% a year of population is about what our growth has been over the past 20 plus years. And so these are challenges and opportunities. One of our big challenges is social services. I see some folks in the nonprofit agency here, they know the challenges we've had with meeting that high demand and the expense, and COVID has not helped that. You can imagine you're that caseworker in social services and you deal with difficult situations, you see difficult situations, then you compound that with COVID and you are still living your life, you have your own family and you're dealing with that yourself. Schools are open, are they closed? Where are my kids gonna go? Do I even keep working? All of those challenges that these social services folks have to deal with. And another thing that's happened over that period of time, we've had 31,000 people in our community on Medicaid, and in February, that's going to go back to about 18,000. So there's going to be a very strong and rude awakening for some folks who've gotten accustomed to those dollars coming in that aren't going to come into them. And these are people already somewhat on the margin, so that's going to be a huge challenge. Mental health services, our CSB, the work that they've had to do, the demands on them. Our jail population. So we were talking about doing an expansion of Middle River Jail because it was just too crowded. COVID did not help that because the state stopped taking inmates that they were responsible for, but we couldn't stop. So we still had folks coming in. We had to, and we had employees. How do you do that in a safe way? That's been a real challenge. Fortunately, after COVID and with the, I don't know if it's the new administration or if it's staff of the new administration or just them paying more attention. We had a lot of pressure from our local delegates, representatives, get state responsible inmates out of our jail in a timely manner, and they've done a really good job of doing that in recent months. In the past year, hopefully we will not have to do that jail expansion as we thought we would need to, but it's still something that's going to be on the horizon. Court space. Court space is going to become an issue for us. I'm going to show you a slide here in a little bit with a conceptual drawing of how we may solve that. We're doing a comprehensive plan update now. That's a comp plan, which your land use is all based upon. That's going on right now. If that's something that interests you, look that up on the county's website. And so all the thing we've talked about, the city is struggling with the project right now, what to do with housing needs, single family duplexes, townhomes, apartments, all of that plays into what we want to call affordable housing. So the city's going to struggle with the project that's being considered right now, and how do you balance all of that with the existing? That's a challenge for this locality. And something new to the county in recent years is student-focused housing, student housing out in the county, mainly on Reservoir. And that was something new to the county. And one of the things the Board of Supervisors has said, not so much publicly, but privately to staff, is we don't want to hurt the city. So we don't want to have that new student housing complex that might come and help us financially for 10 years, but it's going to hurt the older complexes in the city. We don't want to hurt the city. And so that's something the board has commented on. And I think we won't see any student-focused housing coming into the county for a little while here. I think we've gotten what we can handle for now. And solar is a big pressure item for the county, and the impact that has on agricultural land. And so the board struggles with that. They put an aggregate cap of 1,800 acres, and they came up with that number by our population and what we calculated to be our, I'm going to do the air quotes again, fair share of solar. We don't want to provide all of the solar panels that Fairfax County might feel they need, for example. So there's a balance here. And so again, I said briefly just a minute ago that we don't want to hurt the city. Rockingham County doesn't want to hurt the city. What's good for the city is good for us. I see Brian in the back of the room. We work extremely well together from an economic development standpoint, and the same with our towns. If Harrisonburg succeeds, we consider that a success for us as well. One of the things you may have seen in the paper recently is this Massanutten Water and Sewer Service. We have a private company at Massanutten Public Service Corporation that provides water and sewer service up there on the mountain. And what has happened over the past 20 years is those rates have creeped, and now they are effectively double or quadruple what the rates would be for a county customer. I'm not saying that some of that's not justified. We're not opposed to private business, but it has just gotten unbearable for the people up there. And so the county has gotten to the point where reluctantly, this is not something we do eagerly. We're not trying to build an empire. We're trying to meet this essential need of these citizens who live up there. And the rates have just gotten so high. So now the board is coming on their behalf, essentially, because the customers there will pay for the expense of the system. So if you don't live in Massanutten, you're not a water and sewer customer, you won't pay a dime for this effort to acquire that system. And then staffing. This is one of the challenges. I've heard people at my table talking about staffing. How do you find these employees? It's been an incredible challenge in recent years. We had an executive assistant position come open in my office, and 10 years ago, when that position came up, a similar position came up, and we had 50 applicants. We have 5 this time. Unfortunately, we had one good one. And so that's who we hired. She's doing an excellent job, but when you have 50 compared to 5, it gets very difficult. Okay, another big challenge is emergency services. The drop in volunteer service, we talked about that too at our table. The volunteers have time demands, time commitment. It used to be you would put someone in an ambulance and you take them to the hospital. It's a lot more enhanced now. It takes a lot more to do this. Greater level of training, great level of training. And if you're a young dad, Ash, and you got away time with kids, maybe you want time away, I don't know. Or you my demands at work, how do you prioritize? It's gotten very difficult for the volunteers. And so this slide shows, you probably can't see it back there, but in 2000, we had 36 fire and rescue employees in the county. And in 23, we'll have about 130. And that's another area that the county doesn't go into with enthusiasm. We want to help these volunteers continue, but the reality is some of them have struggled and have not been able to. In our ECC, our radio system, it used to be you had your little Motorola that went off a repeater, and it was an actual radio. These aren't radios, these are computers, handheld computers that's digital signals and also information that we didn't have before. So it's enhanced, it's better coverage, but it's extremely costly. Think of your computer upgrade, and then we'll increase that by a factor of probably 10 of what these things cost. It's technology. And so what the county has done, what the board has done, is put more money into buildings and stuff. equipment, apparatus, which didn't happen before. So there's more staffing and there's more apparatus, more equipment, more buildings, more stuff. And they have used the CARES funds, the federal funds, the extra funds we received from the federal government because of the COVID impact. I think wisely. Our Board of Supervisors, I think, has been very wise in how they spent those funds. And this is one example where they've used those funds to meet one-time capital needs and not create any ongoing expenses. And here's an example, and I have to pull a cheat sheet out here. But that truck 90, which they purchased, and they come from Pierce in Appleton, Wisconsin. So that truck cost in 2021, $1.4 million. You can't have chicken sales, you can't work a booth at the fairgrounds as a volunteer agency for that truck. And that was in 2021. If we buy one now, which we're gonna have to do another one, it's 2.1 million. So from 1.4 to 2.1 and a 36-month lead time. So 2 years ago, Pierce had about 300 on order, and the next year they had 700 on order. And the lead time has just gotten longer and longer. So we have to decide now if we want to have a truck 3 years from now. The one on the right, I just call it a fire truck. That one we bought, it was a demo. We bought it used, slightly used, lightly used. It was driven off the lot, you know, like one of those cars. $200,000, when normally that would cost $600,000. If you order one now, it'd be $1 million to buy that apparatus. And I think we have a fire and rescue chief with the county, a guy named Jeremy Holloway, who came up in the volunteer side and he's in the paid side now. I think we have the best chief when it comes to that balance of volunteer, paid. He's excellent. And he's very fiscally responsible. And so when there's opportunity, he's going to find it, like that truck with the 902 on there that he bought for $200,000, or we bought for $200,000. If you live in the county, you bought. You know, we bought, which could have been 600 if we bought it new. And then that building behind there is the Port Road Fire Rescue Station, which that's another one where the volunteers didn't have the funds to do what we needed to do. We have a lot of activity going on out there. Some of you may live in that area. We have a hospital there where we need a vehicle, a truck that can reach the higher floors. And so that fire station, which was built by Harmon, we have a great relationship with all of our contractors here, Nielsen, Lance, Harmon. And Harmon has been exceptionally well at doing these kinds of projects, these Butler building type projects. And you'll notice that the doors are red. You know, it's a firehouse. It feels like it should have red doors. But it's also very responsibly built from a fiscal standpoint. This is not going to win any awards. It's functional. And that's our goal when we do some of these public projects. Now here's courts, the issue of courts. I said I was going to touch on that briefly. This is a conceptual drawing, and you can see the tower in the middle with the clock, and you see the conceptual addition of wings onto the Court Square courthouse, the old courthouse. Right now, this is in our capital improvements plan. This is a concept. We had looked a couple years ago at the Denton building next to county courthouse. That building did not work well from an elevation standpoint. And then we had a lot of folks who got kind of excited about the idea, excited in a not so supportive way, about the idea of taking that building down. So now this is kind of a concept that we've turned to. The other thing there, you can kind of see, they call it a sally port, where you can drive through. One of the challenges we have in a courthouse, you have the public, you have the staff, and you have the inmates who are called in for whatever reason. You have to keep all three of those groups separate, and that's difficult to do. You have different corridors you have to have, different setups, different elevators you have to have. And so if you ever are on Court Square at the right time of the day, you will see a procession of inmates with deputies being escorted over to the courthouse. And it can really, I think it's a little bit, it's not right for them to have to be paraded out. You know, shackled in public, I think it's kind of demeaning. And it's also a little disconcerting if you're the public and happen to be there at that time. So will this happen? We'll have to see. Right now, we don't have the need, but you can't decide now that we need court space next year. Can't do it. And then I said also, we're concerned about impact on the city, the fiscal impact on the city, and the timing of this in relation to their debt service for their high school coming on board. So all these things, we want to take all these into account. You can't pull the trigger on a project like this quickly. So how's the county doing? So these are a number of existing county businesses, all of which over the past 15 years have had significant expansion. And from an economic development standpoint, sorry to get in your discussion topic here, Brian, but these expansions are really, I think, where we win, is we try to help with expansions, help stay out of their way, help facilitate with the building permits, help facilitate from land use standpoint. What can we do to help? And this is the mantra, this is the attitude. This is not something we've indoctrinated county staff with. This is just the way the staff we have, this is the way they are, is we're there to try to support. All of these have had expansion. And the Stone Spring Road area, that's commercial development area on Stone Spring Road, has really expanded. And then the latest one is Negroni, or Veronesi, $150 million investment and about 150 jobs. And they do Italian meats. I think it's also called charcuterie, which is one of my favorite newer words. So Rockingham County, that's in our technology park. That's in our technology park there. So what we have to do, and what I think we've done very effectively, is focus on what our philosophy. And when it came to the federal funds that we got for COVID, a lot of those funds were used to improve workspace area for employees, to upgrade some of the HVAC systems, filtration systems, put offices maybe where we had a cubicle. I told you earlier, we took the dais of the Board of Supervisors room and expanded that so that they could spread out. So we did all of that. Those were ideas, concepts, in many cases that we already had in mind. We spent those funds for one-time capital projects. And do only what the county should do. We're not looking to get into areas that aren't the county's business. We're not looking to expand our empire, with the exception of water and sewer at Massanutten, I guess I could say. But we try to focus on doing what we should do and don't get distracted by other issues. Emergency services, again, we get into that reluctantly, but that's something that counties and cities do. We do emergency services. And then the needs for both the county and for schools. We do education. We don't do it personally. We let our schools do that work, but that's important too. And that's an area where I think our schools should be very, very proud of what they've done, how they've done them, these building renovations, these building updates, how they've utilized technology. And that's supported by the Board of Supervisors from a funding standpoint. And we've touched almost every school, with the exception of a couple in the county over the past 20 years, and built some new schools. Again, like our fire stations, they're not going to win any architectural awards, but they're functional, they're serviceable, they're durable, and that's been the focus of the schools, and we're right there with them. And again, regulate only what should be regulated. We struggle with the state when it comes to certain regulatory actions and dealings we have with them, with DQ and the Department of Health, and find it frustrating. We don't want to be like that on our end. So we want to be smooth in how we operate with our customers. And then follow our financial policies. We have financial policies, fund reserves, fund balances that we follow and maintain. I can give you an example. Broadway High School, that was planned to be, it's going to be expanded. That's under design right now. We were going to pay cash for that with some of these reserves that we have, but we found we can borrow cheaper now because the state is trying to encourage school improvement projects. So we're going to borrow at 3% for that, and we'll pay cash for the Elkton Elementary School work a few years from now. But we try to pay cash where it makes sense to pay cash, and only borrow where we have to borrow. And we want to minimize impact on county taxpayers. And the thing I think that folks don't focus on enough, they focus on lower my taxes or don't raise my taxes, but what's the spending? And I think that's where we as county employees and county staff, we have to focus on that spending, and we need to spend that money wisely and properly and efficiently. If we focus on that spending, then we don't have the need to adjust the tax rate. It can just grow with the growth of the county. And that's something we focus on. I'll give you, we do not fill a single position that becomes vacant unless we do an evaluation of, do we need this position? Constantly doing that kind of evaluation at all levels in the organization. And so this one, I know you can't see it from the back, and I'm going to end with this slide and leave it up there in case you want to come and look at some of this work that's proposed in the works on Stone Spring Road. That Stone Spring Road project, if you told me that that road was going to be built in the time frame that it was, I would say, no way. But the city of Harrisonburg did their thing on Erickson Avenue and within the city. RMH helped build some of the road. Trobud, Ted Bud and Walt Troball built their portion of the road and donated right away for the rest. And then Kim Michael, who's at the other end on 33, donated right away for that portion of the road. And you get some state grant funding, and we put county money and city put money into their project to get that road built. I would have never thought that that would happen. That is a prime example of a public-private partnership and the success and where that can work. So I'm going to leave that one up there, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Can you comment on the watershed issue? Because when you live out there, and I know we've all been getting billed, but not sure I've seen.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Stormwater.
Stormwater, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so the Stormwater Authority, and we feel like that basin that's just been built, that basin is now operational. It's up on Taylor Springs Road. It's fully functional and operational. There's still some seeding that has to be done. We feel like that is going to solve, I'll say 90% of the issues of the problem. And we receive significant grant funds towards that. I anticipate in the next couple years that the rate that we're charging folks for that will be lowered. And then I would guess in the next 10 years, that rate may totally go away. So we're also looking at grant funds to do a little walking trail through that property too, independent of the authority.
I can speak loud.
But we need it for the video.
Oh, for the video, yes, okay. I know, and I think maybe you mentioned earlier, I know that the county's working on a 20-year plan. And what do you see, you've talked about a lot of opportunities and challenges, but what do you see as probably one of the really big discussion or issues that will be kind of brought out in that 20-year plan?
Well, that's a comprehensive, like a land use plan. I think that the court space needs is going to be an issue that comes out. Ultimately, jail space needs, which has been a struggle in the past 15 years, that's going to come out. There may not be agreement on some of those issues. Those are the two things that come to mind. And then just the general pressure of land use changes, projects, development, rezonings, special use permits. That's really where most, at least this Board of Supervisors, and I'm sure the City Council has the same challenge. That's the most difficult part of that job, is trying to balance. You need the housing, but people don't want it here. You need the cell tower, but people don't want it behind them. They want the phone to work, but they don't want to see the tower. They need the landfill, but they don't want the landfill there. You know, all these challenges with every one of these land use issues. That's I think the most difficult decision that city councils or board of supervisors have. And then the next would be just those budgetary decisions, like, do we build the new high school? And what's the timing of that? What does that mean financially? All of that. Very, very difficult decisions that they have to make.
Comment on solar farm planning, because there's a lot of space in the county that could probably contribute to our utility production that we aren't using, or that maybe shouldn't be. I don't know.
Yeah. So solar or renewable, I'll call it, only makes up less than 3% of the power supply for Dominion Power. And then they will tell you that that's just one of a number of different options. I think if you ask them privately, they would tell you nuclear is the better way to go. And so I think the board, in looking at this solar issue, really has looked at it from a land use standpoint. And that's back, one of my comments was that they looked at our population, did a little calculation to figure out what do we think is our fair share. And that's where they came up with the 1,800 acres. And they also had a limit of 150 acres for no more than 3 sites. They could go up to 150 acres. We've had 2 of those. We have another one in the queue. Once that happens, no sites above 50 acres. So they were hoping for sites that would be smaller and not take up large swaths of land. If you go to Halifax County, you'll see a different story. They have thousands of acres. Now, maybe they have a different situation with the tobacco production going away, and then they need the revenue. Our board has never tied any solar decisions into any kind of revenue agreements. Some localities have revenue agreements with these solar farms where the county gets revenue. Our board has intentionally stayed away from that kind of discussion. Because if the solar company is paying for those sharing that revenue, who's paying that fee? Ultimately, it's us. It's the customers who pay that expense.
I'll add my own question. Occasionally we hear about jurisdictions that there's huge deficits. What can you share about Rockingham County financially as far as annual budget versus reserves? Anything you can share?
Well, we have a very kind of skewed situation with those federal funds that came in. So our fund balance is pretty high right now compared to where we like to have it. We try to have a fund balance of 15% of our annual operating budget so that we could go a period of time if we had to and still pay the bills. Some localities have had occasions where they've had to borrow to make payroll. We don't want to do that. I think we're sitting pretty good financially. I feel pretty comfortable with our current tax rate. That we try to set the rate so that it can be stable and not fluctuate. We try to do that with all of our fees, landfill tipping fees, water and sewer fees, for example, to try to keep them stable. And I think we're in a good situation. I think the board and schools have wisely taken care of those maintenance issues over the past 20 plus years where they've done school improvements. They've built the new schools when they needed to. So we don't have anything looming there from a huge cost standpoint. So I feel pretty good about it. I think we have an exceptional finance director with the county, Trish Davidson. The city has an excellent finance director as well. And they talk, they communicate. We talk with Augusta. They have a good network, and I feel really confident in the group we have. My predecessor, Joe Paxton, was a finance guy. He lived and breathed and ate and slept that. So I think this is not just recent. This is for years. County has been on a good path.
One more.
Yeah, you've mentioned tax rates. Just like how do they compare in the region, city, county, Augusta? And then you also mentioned something about the landfill.
Mhm.
And I go out there once in a while and still have this big pile of stuff. What is the longevity or the lifespan of a landfill, and what are plans when that one's filled?
Yeah. So thanks for not calling it a dump. That's what my kids like to do to kind of set me off. I was a public works guy before. When I say my kids, they're now 20. They're all in their 20s. But the landfill, we plan out 40 plus years. So we have an Excel sheet that goes 30 years that talks about the rates and the equipment you want to buy, and closure and expansion and new cell opening. At that parcel right now, within that existing footprint, we have about 40 years. And so you cannot, you think a courthouse needs some planning to expand, a landfill needs a lot of planning to expand, because DEQ works very slowly in the approval process. So I moved here in April of 2000, and we ran out of space in our landfill in November of 2000. We opened the cell that day in November of 2000. We were within weeks of having to ship waste somewhere else. As far as tax rates, cities is a little higher. That's not uncommon for an urban area. I think we're consistent. We're going to be higher than Augusta. We're going to be higher than Page. But I think some of the decisions they've made, or our neighbors, some of the decisions they've made when it comes to schools, for example, I don't know if those are wise decisions in the long run, because you got to eat those bites a little bit at a time. Same with fire and rescue. I don't know if they're in the same situation as we are from an apparatus standpoint. They've been, how on top of that they've been.
Thank you, Stephen. This is a theme we heard from Chaz a few months back, but to have a government that really cares about our dollars is refreshing.
I'm sure Chaz was more exciting.
I don't know. That was well done. Yeah, Chaz is always interesting as well, but we do appreciate your service and your speaking to us. Amanda, thanks for coming back, and we hope to see more of you. And I wish I remembered the names of our guests, but thank you for being here today.
Joe and Solani. Joe and Solani.
Joe and Solani, thank you for coming today, and we are adjourned.